6 days. In the summer of 1967, that is all it took to change the map of the Middle East. In less than a week, the Egyptian military was devastated. The Sinai Peninsula, a massive, golden desert that belonged to Egypt, was gone. Occupied. The world looked at Egypt and saw a broken nation. Military experts in America and Europe declared that the Egyptian army would need 20 years to recover. They said Egypt would never cross the Suez Canal again. But behind closed doors in Cairo, President Anwar al-Sadat was not preparing for defeat. He was preparing for the impossible. This is the story of Operation Badr. The greatest military deception, and the most shocking surprise attack, in modern history. To take back the Sinai, the Egyptian army had to cross the Suez Canal. But the occupying forces had spent years building a fortress on the other side. It was called the Bar Lev Line. It was not a wall of concrete. It was a wall of solid sand. In some places, it was 70 feet high. As tall as a massive apartment building. It was angled perfectly so that tanks could not climb it. At the bottom, secret pipes were filled with flammable oil. If the Egyptians tried to cross the water in boats, the occupying army would push a button, and turn the entire river into a wall of fire. Soviet engineers told Egypt it would take thousands of heavy explosives to break through the sand. It seemed hopeless. Until a young Egyptian officer named Baki Zaki Youssef had a brilliant idea. He had worked on the Aswan High Dam. He knew how to move earth. He told his commanders, do not use explosives. Use water, Egypt secretly bought hundreds of high-powered water pumps from Germany. They would use the water from the canal itself to blast holes straight through the sand fortress. But having a plan was not enough. Egypt needed total surprise. They started an operation of psychological warfare. For months, Egypt moved troops to the border, ran a few drills, and then sent them home. They did this so many times that the occupying army stopped caring. They thought it was just a show. In October 1973, Egyptian soldiers on the border were told to sit in the sun. They were told to eat oranges and act lazy. Even the soldiers themselves did not know they were about to go to war. Then came October 6th. It was Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year for the occupying forces. The radios were silent. The country was at rest. At exactly 2 p.m. in the afternoon, the silence shattered. 220 Egyptian fighter jets flew low over the Red Sea to avoid radar. They crossed the canal and struck enemy communication towers, bases, and command centers. At the exact same moment, 2,000 Egyptian artillery guns opened fire. It was one of the heaviest artillery barrages the world had ever seen. The earth shook. The sky turned gray with smoke. Under the cover of the smoke, the first wave of Egyptian infantry rushed to the water. They didn't use massive, slow ships. They used light, rubber boats. Thousands of men rowed across the canal, chanting as they hit the sand. They blocked the oil pipes so the water could not catch fire. They climbed the massive sand walls with rope ladders. Within hours, the impossible Bar Lev Line was swarming with Egyptian soldiers. Next came the engineers. They started the water pumps. The high-pressure cannons blasted the sand. Thousands of tons of earth melted away into the river. In just 6 hours, they cut massive holes through the fortress. They threw floating bridges across the water. By midnight, hundreds of Egyptian tanks and tens of thousands of soldiers were pouring into the Sinai desert. The occupying commanders woke up in total shock. Their invincible wall was gone. They rushed their reserve tanks to the desert to crush the Egyptian infantry. But Egypt was ready. Soldiers carrying advanced, wire-guided missiles hid in the sand. When the enemy tanks arrived, they were destroyed. In the first 3 days, the occupying army lost hundreds of tanks. The myth of their invincible army was broken forever. But a war is never won in a single day. Realizing their ally was on the edge of total collapse, the United States launched Operation Nickel Grass. It was the largest military airlift in history. America sent thousands of tons of weapons, fresh tanks, and advanced fighter jets directly to the occupying army. With fresh American weapons, the enemy launched a massive counterattack. The Sinai Desert turned into a graveyard of burning metal. It was the largest tank battle the world had seen since World War II. The enemy managed to find a small gap between two Egyptian armies. They crossed back over the canal in the opposite direction, trying to surround the city of Suez. But the Egyptian forces, and the armed citizens of Suez, fought house to house. They refused to let the city fall. By late October, the United Nations forced a ceasefire. The guns finally went silent. The occupying forces had pushed back, but the reality on the ground had already changed. Egypt had done what the world said was impossible. They shattered the Bar Lev Line. They proved they could fight, and they restored their national pride. Because of the brilliant shock of October 6, the political dynamic of the world shifted. Years later, President Sadat would travel to Jerusalem to negotiate peace. And eventually, every single inch of the Sinai Desert was returned to Egypt. Today, military academies around the globe still study the crossing of the canal. It remains a masterclass in strategy, engineering, and absolute secrecy. A reminder that no wall is unbreakable.